Hey there! Welcome back to another review, this time of the 1980 cult classic Flash Gordon. Flash! Ah! Savior of the universe! Flash Gordon is a camp cult classic based on the comic strip of the same name. Now, Flash Gordon is actually a movie that George Lucas wanted to make before Star Wars, but he wasn't able to get the rights, so he decided to make his own film inspired by Flash Gordon, inspired by the Flash Gordon serials that he remembered watching when he was a kid, and that ended up becoming Star Wars. And this movie, I have a special soft spot for this film. This is a film that I grew up with. This is one of the first movies I remember my parents ever buying on DVD. I even remember when we bought the film on DVD. Now, it's not this. This is a DVD I bought recently, the Savior of the Universe edition. But for the longest time, we had the original Image Entertainment release. Now, that DVD has not held up well. I actually sold it a while back. The picture quality, it does not look good, and it's really not a very good DVD. But back then, when you didn't have an HD flat widescreen television, it was fine. It was serviceable enough, and that's how I watched the movie. And I enjoyed it when I was a kid. I've always had a soft spot for this film. Now, it's introduced to it because my grandmother, of all people, this is actually one of her favorite films. She always got a kick out of it, and so I've had a lot of fond memories watching it with my grandmother and also watching it with the rest of my family. So this is definitely a movie that I absolutely do have nostalgic feelings for, but I still think it's a pretty dang good, fun movie, even if you put the nostalgia aside. I understand some of the people who were behind Flash Gordon, the Flash Gordon comic strips, aren't fans of this film because they felt Dino Laurentis. I don't know how to say his last name. It's Italian. I'm not Italian. I don't know what's going on. But Dino, I'm just gonna call him Dino. So Dino thought that this would be better as a comedy, and he wanted Flash Gordon to be a comedy, and a lot of the comic strip creators didn't like that because apparently the comic strip is more serious. I like the fact that it's campy, and I like the fact that it's not serious. If they took this seriously, it would be laughable, and not in a good way. You look at this movie, you look at this art. You're not really art deco. That's the wrong thing. Pop art. You look at this pop art production design. You look at this larger than life plot. You look at these characters like Ming the Merciless, a guy named Flash Gordon. If you take it seriously, it would be nobody would it would be laughed off the screen. Nobody would ever take this seriously. It's one thing to take it seriously reading a comic strip. It's a whole other thing entirely to take it seriously while watching a movie. So I think they went the right direction with high camp, and that made the movie extremely entertaining in my opinion. So Flash Gordon is a 1980 film, like I was saying. It's a science fiction fantasy movie. It's directed by Mike Hodges. It's produced by Dino and based on a screenplay by Lorenzo Semple Jr. It's based on the comic strips by Alex Raymond, and it stars Sam J. Jones as our hero, Flash Gordon, Melody Anderson as Dale Arden, Max von Sydow as Emperor Ming the Merciless, Topol as Dr. Hans Zarkov, Ornella Muti as Princess Aura. Oh man, I'm gonna be honest. I'd have to. I think my first sexual awakening, like the first moment I think that as a young man I had some sort of sexual awakening of some kind, probably might have coincided with seeing Ornella Muti in this film. She's such a slutty actress. She's a terrible actress, but she's got that voice that just sounds extremely slutty, and it's just and her character is a slut too. So that was totally intentional. You also have Timothy Dalton plays Prince Baron, Brian Blessed as Prince Voltan. Peter Wyngarde as General Clytus, who is essentially Doctor Doom. And this is, sadly, like, this is the best Doctor Doom I've ever seen on film. Is General Clytus, who isn't even really Doctor Doom. Mary Angela Mulatto as General Kala. And you also have Richard O'Brien from Rocky Horror Picture Show, who has a little role as Fico, who's one of the characters, from Aboria, one of the planets in the film. So the movie has a pretty crazy development. Okay, the movie, Flash Gordon, the film, it came about when producer Lou Scheimer, he was seeking additional funding for his animated NBC movie of the week called Flash Gordon, The Greatest Adventure of All. And this was eventually actually aired in 1982. He turned to producer Dino De Laurentini. I can never say his last name, so that's why I keep calling him Dino. So he turned to Dino, who agreed to help out if Scheimer could finagle the rights for him to make a theatrical film. Impressed with Scheimer's results, and the prospect of cashing in on the theatrical version, NBC ended up shelving the animated movie for a handful of years and had Scheimer's company recut it and turned it into the Saturday morning series Flash Gordon, which was aired, I guess, in 1979, a year before this film came out. I don't know if anybody who's watching this video has any memories of that show. I know I don't, because I don't think I've ever seen it. I have seen, like, the revival they tried to do in the 90s, I think. But I think it lasted only, like, one pilot episode. And Dino had actually originally hoped that director Federico Fellini would direct this, Federico, not Federico. Director Federico Fellini would direct the film. The director had actually contributed to the original Flash Gordon strip during World War II. But that didn't end up working out. So then Dino turned to Sergio Leone. Sergio Leone, who you all know is really famous for his spaghetti westerns. So he turned to him to direct the movie, but Leone refused because he believed the script was not faithful to the original comic strips. And then he went to Nicholas Roeg, who actually did agree to do the film, but he then bowed out due to creative differences, because one of his proposals, if I can say the word proposal, was to excise the trademark cliffhanger as a melodrama, seeing Flash as more of a metaphysical messiah. There's Nicholas Roeg looking way too deep into something called Flash Gordon. When Nicholas Roeg was going to direct, Debbie Harry from Blondie was to play Princess Aura, and Keith Carradine was going to be Ming the Merciless. Would have been interesting to see Debbie Harry as Princess Aura. I still would have been awakened, that's for sure. Maybe even more so with Debbie Harry. She can definitely call me anytime. So Mike Hodges was then the 8th director chosen. I don't know what the other directors were because they're not listed here, but apparently there was a bunch of other directors that turned the film down. And it wasn't just directors that this film had a hard time finding. They had a hard time finding Flash because they went through a bunch of people. And one of them was Kurt Russell. Yeah, Kurt fucking Russell could have played Flash Gordon. But he actually auditioned. Kurt Russell actually auditioned for the role. And according to an interview with Kurt in Starlog magazine from August 1981, Dino really wanted Russell for the part. Understandably so, because Russell was just a great actor. But Russell ultimately turned it down because he thought the character was lacking in personality. And I agree with Kurt. As much as I like this film, the character of Flash Gordon, the performance by Sam J. Jones, is really wooden, and the character is a pretty forgettable hero. I enjoy the movie for its production design, its art direction. I enjoy the movie for its just wild, crazy zaniness. I enjoy the movie for its brief moments of really clever, dark humor. I enjoy the movie for the performances by certain actors like Timothy Dalton, as well as, of course, being the Merciless himself, Max von Sydow, who is mercifully he's just mirthfully merciless. He's mirthfully merciless as Ming, and I even like Topol as Zarkov, and of course the score and the soundtrack by Queen, which is epic. The soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks for any film, if you ask me. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Queen, and this is like a match made in heaven, and it's epic. It's so awesome. I do have to admit, this movie wouldn't be nearly as fun or as enjoyable if it didn't have the score by Queen. But I can't say I enjoyed the film immensely for Sam J. Jones. Although, he does have a certain charm to him that I do like. He's this kind of fish out of water type guy. He's kind of a regular guy who's put into this crazy fantasy situation. He's just a football player. And he performed that role really well, just like a random jock guy who ended up in outer space and had to save the world. So there is something endearing about him, but I have to admit the way the character is written, it's not very memorable. So, and it doesn't have a lot of personality. So I can see why Kurt Russell was like, nah, I don't think so. Now, Kurt wasn't the only one who turned down the film or was going to play Flash, but ended up being dropped for whatever reason. The other actor was, of all people, Arnold. Yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger was turned down for the lead role because of his impenetrable Austrian accent. Actually, he actually won the role. Dino wanted Arnold and actually championed for him and got him, but then eventually the studio was like, no, Flash is supposed to be an American. He's a football player for the New York Jets. We can't have him be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And at this point in time, Arnold Schwarzenegger was pretty much an unknown. Like, he had done some films like Pumping Iron and that really shitty film Hercules in New York and that awful TV movie, The Jane Mansfield Story, where Arnold tried to play an American there and failed miserably because he's all trying to play Mickey Hargitay, and I think he's an American. I could be wrong though, but and he couldn't even say the word Jane. He kept saying it, chain, chain, chain. Can you just imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger as Flash Gordon? I can't. I'm flying blind on a rocket cycle. Yeah, I'm Flash. Flash. Savior of the universe. But no, that's not what happened. Sam J. Jones ended up getting the lead role because he was cast in the role after being spotted by the mother-in-law of Dino on an episode of The Dating Game, of all places. And also, speaking of casting choices, Dennis Hopper was considered for the role of Dr. Zarkov. I mean, Topol was great, but can you imagine Dennis Hopper in this movie? Now, that would have been pretty crazy. That would have made this crazy movie even crazier. And speaking of crazy things, most of Sam J. Jones's dialogue for the film was apparently dubbed. This was due to the fact that Jones had a falling out with producer Dino over lack of payment and refused to go into the recording studio to loop his lines. And it seems like it didn't end there. This feud, it doesn't end with just, you didn't pay me, so I'm not going to do my lines. And if that is the case, then Dino, wow. Stop being a cheapskate. Pay your star to come in and loop his lines. But anyway, it seems like it's deeper than that, because according to the book Dino, The Life and Films of Dino, De Laurentiis, Sam J. Jones kept getting into fights during the filming of the movie. At one point, Jones was in the hospital with a big scrape on his face, and Dino himself barged into the operating room to make sure they fixed his face so as to not leave a visible scar. But Jones kept causing trouble, and then at Christmas, he left for Los Angeles and he never returned. So Dino recalls that he told Mike Hodges, "Well, keep going with the very best stand-in that you can find." I mean, the backstory for this is crazy. Like, it's a crazy movie. It's weird. It's wacky. But the backstory is even weirder and even wackier. Even Mike Hodges, he he had a fun quote where he was talking about this movie. He says, "This is the only $27 million production that had to be completely improvised." So, considering all the problems on the set, and considering just how they had a total disconnect with the writers and with people, half the crew was Italian and half the crew was American, and so there was a huge language barrier on the set of this movie. So considering all of these issues that they had on the set of Flash Gordon, for them to turn out a film that is, for the most part, cheeky fun. It's got its tongue firmly planted in its left cheek for the entire production. Um, I'd have to say it's a pretty big accomplishment. Now, Mike Hodges, he also considered commissioning Pink Floyd to compose the score, and that would have been interesting. I love Queen's score to death, and I think their score fits the film a lot better than something that Pink Floyd would do. But I like Pink Floyd a lot as well, so I would have been curious to see what Pink Floyd would have brought to Flash Gordon. But of course, this didn't happen because Queen got involved. And apparently, Dino had never heard of Queen before making the movie. Queen at this time was a pretty big band. I don't know how he could have never heard of them, but okay. The band was approached for the gig in 1979, and they were immediately interested in the prospect of working on a film. Their manager arranged a meeting with Dino to discuss the opportunity, and he allegedly asked, "Who are the Queens?" I mean, this film should have a feature-length documentary. I mean, it has a big enough fan base to get one, but apparently there's not much in terms of features on this special edition, on this Savior of the Universe edition, because there's only an interview with Alex Ross, who talks about how Flash Gordon influenced his work and how much he enjoyed the film. And then you have an interview with the screenwriter Lorenzo Semple Jr. But that's really about it. And there's like an episode of one of the serials. And a trailer for the really awful Sci-Fi Channel Flash Gordon show. But that's it. There's a Blu-ray or a DVD overseas that has a commentary track with Mike Hodges. But that didn't get ported over to this release. The film is digitally remastered and has 5.1 surround sound and looks better. This set comes with a, you can open it up and it's actually a really cool looking set. Has some little cards and stuff. But other than that, there's really not much in terms of features. And this film has a pretty big fan base. I mean, recently it became a meme with Voltan, played by Brian Blessed, saying "dive." He's going "dive, Hawkman, dive." So they used that as that became a meme fairly recently. So it's popular enough that it's in memes and stuff. So I don't know why this doesn't have a 2-disc Blu-ray or a Blu-ray collector's edition loaded with features. Maybe a Shout Factory can do it because they have some. They've been able to work some deals with Universal, so maybe they could do that. I love that. I love to actually see real interviews with Sam J. Jones and the actress who played Dale Arden, Melody Anderson. If you can get Max von Sydow to talk about the film, Timothy Dalton, Brian Blessed, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a feature-length documentary on this movie because I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg, the tip of Phrygia, when it comes to the backstory for this movie. So, and I'll get to that. I'll get to the rest of the little bits of trivia after I get done kind of talking about some of the sequences and moments in the movie that I like. So what I'm going to do real quick right here is I'm going to do a little overview of the plot. Flash Gordon is an American football player. He's actually a quarterback for the New York Jets. I think there were scenes shot with Sam J. Jones as a quarterback, but they weren't, or they were written in the screenplay. Because I have the novelization of the movie, and there is a prologue that shows Flash Gordon playing in the Super Bowl, but I guess they weren't able to get the rights from the NFL to be able to, use the Jets logo and the uniform and mention the Super Bowl. I don't know what happened with that in particular, but that definitely is not something that you really see much of. You see Flash Gordon, you know he's a quarterback though, because it is mentioned, and he is on the cover of some magazine. So he's an American quarterback for the New York Jets, who, along with Dale Arden, uh, are returning to New York City after a long vacation, until the plane that they are passengers on crashes into the laboratory of Russian scientist Dr. Hans Zarkov. Now, the plane crashes because Ming shows up in the clouds and starts fucking with the plane. And I love how the movie opens up. It's just Ming with his right-hand guy looking at Earth, and he's all like, Clytus, I'm bored. Yeah, he's just this emperor of some alien planet who's just bored out of his fucking mind, and he decides to entertain himself by messing with Earth. So he decides he's going to cause an apocalypse. He's going to move our moon and cause a lunar eclipse of some kind, and it's just he's going to make basically he's going to what he's planning on doing is causing our moon to collide into Earth and just cause all kinds of havoc and essentially destroy the Earth for his own amusement. And so he's messing around with Flash Gordon and Dale. They crash their plane into Dr. Hans Zarkov's laboratory, which is kind of looks like a giant greenhouse. And Hans Zarkov is already seeing all these things that are happening. There's pieces of moon rock that are crashing into the ground. There's no sun. And he actually predicted that there was some other force across the universe that was messing with the Earth. And of course, his peers at NASA laughed at him and thought he was crazy, and so he was pretty much ridiculed and laughed out of NASA. But now he's right, and he's trying to get his friend and fellow confidant Munson to join with him, on this trip to where the source comes from, because he's found where this source is that's messing with the Earth, and he has this rocket ship that he's built inside of his laboratory. Well, Munson's like, I'm out of here. I ain't doing that. And so he ends up taking Flash and Dale at gunpoint, getting them to go inside of his rocket ship as unwilling passengers. You need to put your feet on the red pedal. The red pedal. And they rocket off into space. And they set a course for the planet Mongo, which is where this signal is coming from. They arrive on Mongo, fish out of water, and Flash and his companions, they find that the planet is under the rulership of the evil Emperor Ming the Merciless. And Ming is attacking Earth with natural disasters as he bids to destroy Earth. Realizing Earth and the human race is in mortal danger, Flash decides to unite the kingdoms of Mongo and combine the forces of rivals Prince Baron and Prince Voltan to rescue Dale, who is to become Ming's wife and defeat Ming and save Earth from annihilation. And all to the score and the soundtrack by Queen. So, yeah, the plot's pretty straightforward. I have to admit, the script, there's a lot of stuff going on in certain, instances. There's subplots, some things going on around here, and it kind of hurts the pacing. I think some things could have been trimmed down, and I do feel that the film could have been cut down in terms of the running time. It's 114 minutes, so it's almost 2 hours long, and this type of movie does not need to be that long. Also, I do feel the movie could have used a lot more action. There's a little bit here and there. I love the scene where the Hawkman and Flash, they attack War Rocket Ajax with the soundtrack by Queen. But other than that, a lot of the action sequences aren't particularly that memorable or particularly that thrilling. I like the scene where Flash fights Prince Baron on this sort of platform with spikes on it. And I like that scene. And apparently, this sequence was kind of hard to shoot because, according to Sam J. Jones, while filming this tilting disc fight scene, the actors, Sam J. Jones and Timothy Dalton, they would get covered in paint by the disc that was spray painted silver. They would have to take extra time between each take to wipe the silver paint off of their bodies. So that's what Mike Hodges means by a $27 million improvisation project. Just craziness. So I like that scene, and I love the football scene. Where Flash Gordon is at Ming's palace, and he has this thing that kind of looks like a football, and he's using it to knock out some of Flash, not really his guards, but Ming's guards, knocking out some of Ming's guards, and Dale's going, "Go Flash, go, go Flash, go!" Like she's some kind of a cheerleader. And apparently that was improvised by the actress Melody Anderson, and I gotta give you huge kudos for that, girl. Huge kudos. That was great, and that was a fun, silly moment. And even Ming's like talking to his right hand man Clytus, and is, "Are you sure you gave them the right pills?" Yeah. So I mean, that was a fun scene. And speaking of that kind of fun sort of humor, I think the film could have been funnier. I think it could have used more dark humor, a lot more dark humor. Some of my favorite jokes in this are the stuff like during the wedding, where it's all like there's this thing that shows up in the sky, like sky lettering, that's like saying things like there's like a banner in the sky flown by like some spaceship, and it says, "All join, be merry for Ming the Merciless's Ming's wedding, our emperor's wedding." And it's like all people who oppose, or all people who do not are not merry will be executed. So I mean, there's this kind of dark humor, that black humor, that really cracks me up. Um, so yeah. So there's a few things that it definitely could have had a little bit more of. Could have been funnier, could have had tighter pacing, could have had more action. But for the most part, though, I really do really like this film. I think there isn't another film like it in a lot of ways, with the way that it's set up in terms of its art direction, the look of Mongo, um, the performances. It's an unapologetically camp movie. And if you don't like camp and you're not into that kind of stuff, then yeah, I could see why you find it lame, or you wouldn't be a fan of it. It's not for everybody, but if you like really campy, tongue-in-cheek, over-the-top movies, Flash Gordon is definitely one of the better ones of that particular ilk, of that particular genre. And I think I'll probably end this with a little bit more bits of trivia about the Hawkman and a few other things. Now, or just Ming himself. I mean, Ming, first off, Max von Sydow's performance was wonderful. I loved it. It's one of my favorite villain performances on film. And he had a lot to work with. He had a lot to deal with. His costume, his Ming costume, weighed over 70 pounds. And he could only stand in it for a few minutes at a time. So he was a trooper, and he did a really great job. It's one of my favorite performances by Max von Sydow, and I love it. It's a really great villain. I love the line where he's looking at photos of Hitler, and he's all, "Now there's someone who showed promise." Yeah, it's just kind of just unapologetically dickish. It's just a big dick from outer space. Um, who happens to have a lot of power. And the Hawkman, I love Brian Blessed. He's a blessing. He's a blessing in this movie. He really is. It's a lot of fun. Boltan is a great character. You can tell that Brian is having a lot of fun playing the role as well. And apparently it is one of his favorite roles, because his favorite character, the Flash Gordon strips, was Voltan. So all of the actors playing the Hawkmen, including Voltan, including Brian Blessed, they couldn't sit down because the costumes would hurt their backs. And this is quoted from Melody Anderson from Starlog. They could never sit down because when they did, the wings would dig into their backs. When we had a rest period, you'd see all these guys laying on their stomachs with wings like they were ready to take off. It was a pretty funny sight. According to Brian Blessed, he actually had to sit on a perch. I just love that. I'm just imagining the image of Brian Blessed as Voltan just sitting on a perch. It just cracks me up. And according to Brian Blessed, it took about 3 days to prepare the Ajax sequence and put everything, including dozens of hanging Hawkmen, in place. Blessed put in his own special effects going pew 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 as he shot his cardboard bazooka. Because of this, they had to take another day to reset. Blessed didn't feel too bad as Sam J. Jones was also a pretty hot hand with his prop gun, also filling in the pew-pews. Oh man, you can just tell they had a blast shooting this film. I want to see that outtake. That would be a laugh riot to see that outtake. Just Brian Blessed just going around with a cardboard bazooka going pew 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 pew. And Sam J. Jones is Flash going pew 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 pew. Oh, that's hilarious. So for a scene where Dale, and then there's a whole scene here with Dale that isn't even in the movie. This shows you how much they were improvising. For a scene where Dale turns into a giant spider for a dream sequence, Melody Anderson spent 6 hours getting painted green, wearing fake eyes and fangs with a headpiece that weighed over 20 pounds. When Mike Hodges came in, he said, "This is wonderful, but we can't use this. It has absolutely nothing to do with the script." So there's your improvisation for you. Get your actress in makeup for 6 hours for a scene that isn't even going to be in the movie. It wasn't even in the script to begin with. And that now infamous ending, which I crack up every time. It really puts a smile on my face at the end of the movie where Ming's like floating message thing says, pretty much says, "Flash, you've saved Earth," and all of that. And Sam J. Jones jumps in the air and he's like, "Yeah!" It's like the most. It's so unexpected when you first see the movie. You're not expecting that at all. And it's so unapologetically goofy and happy, but at the same time it's like really bad acting. So Sam J. Jones just jumping in the air, freeze frame, yeah! Apparently that was improvised by Sam J. Jones because nobody could actually figure out how to end the damn movie. So I mean, even that moment was improvised. I mean, let's just call this improv Gordon, because there's a lot of improv in this movie apparently. But yeah, I always found that funny. I love that scene, and it's really fun to know the origins of that particular sequence. But anyway, Flash Gordon is a fun movie. It's not perfect. Some of the effects don't hold up too well, but I don't think some of them were meant to. I think some of them were kind of bad on purpose. At least I think so anyway, because they're trying to do a homage to the serials, the Flash Gordon serials of the 30s and 40s. And like I was saying, it can be a bit boring at times. The lead's kind of dull, and you could have more action. And the climax is pretty anticlimactic. All this build up for the final confrontation between Ming and Flash, and Flash just crashes the War Rocket Ajax into Ming and stabs him with the front of it. And that's really about it. And then you have like a sequel bait thing where is Ming dead or is he not? The end, question mark. And yeah. But I do have to admit, I do get chills and I do get a smile on my face every time I see the ending where the Hawkmen form a message in the sky that says, "Thanks, Flash." And that's kind of how I sum up for the film, Thanks, Flash, for providing me with hours and hours of entertainment, for giving me a film that I can enjoy with my parents, with my grandmother, with all these other members of my family. And thanks, for turning out as well as you did, considering all of the obstacles that you had in your way during production. So, yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite science fiction fantasy films, and it always will be, warts and all. So anyway, I don't know what else to say about Flash Gordon, except if I was going to rate out of 5 stars, I'd give it 4 out of 5. It's a step down from 5 because of the things that I already mentioned a bunch of times already. But other than that, I think it's a really fun, solid, big budget, campy B movie. And that kind of stuff is right up my alley and always has been. So I personally don't want to see a remake. I know I've heard things about it. I remember, I think it was the director, it was Stephen Sommers who was attached to one, and they didn't do it. And I'm kind of glad. I really don't want to see a remake of Flash Gordon. I'm fine with just one Flash Gordon, the one Flash Gordon being this campy cult classic. Because it feels and looks like a comic strip come to life, even more so than some comic book films that I've seen. It's a live action cartoon, and that's a part of its charm. It's a big part of its charm, at least for me anyway. So, although I don't like its connections to the shitty Ted movies, because I mean, I'm not a fan of those films. If you are, to each their own. But if I was going to see Sam J. Jones as Flash again, I'd like to see that in like a documentary. But we'll see what happens. But anyway, I don't know what else to say. So thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.